40 kilometers off mainland Tanzania on the East African coast, Zanzibar beckons. Its buildings of coral stone bear witness to past splendor. The island, whose proper name is Unguja, was once a trading post for seafarers in search of gold, ivory, spices, and slaves. But the stone town itself is little more than 150 years old. Its expansion started in the 1830s, when Omani rulers moved to Zanzibar. While they erected their sea view palaces, Indian tradesmen built narrow, bizarre streets. Demand for cloves, a new cash crop worked by slaves on large plantations, grew rapidly, as did contact with Western markets after the opening of the Suez Canal and the establishment of a British protectorate in 1890. The stone town's always been cosmopolitan. This is reflected in its religious institutions, which serve Muslims along with Hindus and Christians. A Roman Catholic cathedral caters for just a fraction of the small Christian population, which also includes Protestant groups. Slaves from the African mainland were once brought here before being shipped on to foreign destinations. After the trade was banned in 1873, an Anglican cathedral was built on what had been the world's last open slave market. Nowadays, the site is popular with tourists. It's also associated with anti-slavery campaigners. This window is dedicated to British sailors who died fighting the slavers. There are other features, examples of the workmanship seen in many stone town houses, and more curiously, the 12 pillars of Italian marble installed upside down by mistake. Zanzibar's economic base was fragile. Commercial activity declined after the abolition of slavery itself, and independence was to bring new problems. A third of the stone town was abandoned after the 1964 revolution. Buildings passed into public ownership. Dozens have collapsed in recent times. But the liberalization of the economy in the mid-80s paved the way for change. And this is one result. In April 1994, exactly 100 years after its construction, a contract for the restoration of the old dispensary was signed. But work was already underway. 3 years on, the leader of the world's Ismaili Muslims visited Zanzibar for the inauguration of the restored building, accompanied by the presidents of the Union of Tanzania and Zanzibar. It was the first project undertaken on the island by the Aga Khan Trust for Culture and its Historic Cities Support Program, part of a conservation plan to arrest the decay and revitalize the old stone town in its entirety.
Something worthy of attention and support.
For all concerned, this was a moment to be proud of.
4 years have been devoted to the painstaking restoration of this building. A concerted effort has been made to revive many of the skills and techniques used in its original construction, and the entire project has employed restoration techniques of the highest international standard. I hope that you will find that this effort has faithfully and successfully recovered the building's essential genius.
A symbol of multicultural Zanzibari architecture, the building has a checkered history. What visitors can see now was denied to the rich merchant who conceived it. Taria Topan intended it as a hospital. The foundation stone was laid in July 1887 to mark the Golden Jubilee of Britain's Queen Victoria. But Topan was not there. Already ill in Bombay, he died 4 years later, before completion. When it was eventually finished, the ground floor was used as a dispensary and the 2 upper floors as apartments. The building stood on the seafront then. The port area opposite was reclaimed in the 1920s. 100 years later, and its name and role have changed again, this time to that of cultural centre. There's no mistaking the Indian influence on the balconies. They're typical features along the East African coast and the Indian subcontinent. But there's more to this than just decoration. The whole building was designed to let sea breezes flow through, with the internal courtyard acting as a flue to help cool the tropical heat, a natural ventilation process known for centuries in these regions. A major problem was the introduction of new elements to ensure modern standards of comfort, safety and hygiene. Here, the only place where service units could be located without destroying the building's integrity was on the roof. Teak from India, glass from Holland, or plaster from local coral limestone. The restorers took care to locate their material's original sources and to use time-tested techniques. This room was planned as matron's office. It's to become a restaurant above the first-floor exhibition galleries. Turning the building into the hospital it never was would have required too many transformations, but in keeping with Topan's wish, it'll be open to the public, albeit for recreational purposes. Those who masterminded the project wanted to show that respecting the historical fabric of the structure worked best.
We've tried to restore the building using only the original materials, using good conservation practice. These buildings are delicate things, and if you treat them in an inappropriate manner, then you can really make the problems worse. For instance, if you restore buildings using cement, then very often it can exacerbate the problem you're trying to deal with because the material is too hard. The best way of doing it was with lime plaster, and that's the way we've tried to do it here. So we hope it acts as a precedent. We hope it shows people how to go forward, how it is indeed possible to restore these buildings in an appropriate manner.
The inauguration over, the lights went up. Aptly so, as Zanzibar was the first East African town to have electric street lamps. Following the same conservation principles, the Trust for Culture helped rehabilitate two other historic structures at the other end of the seafront. The old ex-Telcoms building and the so-called Chinese doctor's residence next to it were converted into a hotel for the discerning traveller, at a cost of $7 million US. As with the old dispensary, great attention was given to detail. Architects and consultants made surveys of all existing elements of architecture and detailed drawings of features in a poor state of repair so they could be recreated. The Scottish explorer David Livingstone was once a guest at the Chinese doctor's residence. Most rooms have balconies with a view over the ocean. The swimming pool has replaced an earlier tennis court. And priority was given to the environment to avoid some all too common pitfalls of tourism. For the well-off, prices are high, there are the usual creature comforts, but showers, not baths, to save precious water. The project also involved landscaping the square in front of the hotel, one of the largest green areas within the stone town. And here too, the search for original sources led the contractors to import materials from the West and mainland Africa or Asia. To provide extra accommodation, both buildings were linked by a colonnaded walkway based on an original loggia. And so as not to spoil the desired effect, other new structures were designed not to stand out, so the two historic buildings remained the dominant features. And so they stand, as in their heyday, an old Arab house modernized as the home of the British consul in the 1940s and 50s, and colonial in style the former telecommunications exchange, built early this century, though the emphasis on authenticity dictated some unusual choices, making this a rare quality hotel with corrugated iron roofing.
So when you get there for lunch,
a conscious decision,
gobble,
one of many,
gobble, so
in such a large and exciting project.
Okay. The importance of this project from our perspective really is the fact that it's one of the first times we've been able to take a very comprehensive approach to the restoration, revitalization set of issues that historic buildings and historic cities present. The fact that the hotel, the old dispensary, the Kalili Square where we're standing are all part of the undertaking means that we're able to intervene in a variety of ways and that are all important to historic cities programs. And also, I think, do it in the context of a comprehensive plan that's been developed for the Stone Town, which hopefully will attract the interest of others who would pick particular projects to be involved in. So I think the special significance here is that overall approach to the needs of an historic city like Zanzibar.
There's much to be done to upgrade the Stone Town's dilapidated infrastructure. The restoration work has highlighted the shortage of artisans. As when the old dispensary was built, skilled carpenters from India had to be brought in. There's no shortage of work now for this local craftsman. He carved doors for the SERENA Inn and is now training others. The Stone Town has just 16,000 inhabitants. but Greater Zanzibar has more than 10 times that number, and most of them commute here daily to work. After decades of neglect, everything here needs overhauling, including the roads and sewage system. But there's optimism as more key areas and buildings are earmarked for restoration, none perhaps more prominent than the House of Wonders. A major landmark with its clock tower, cannon said to have been captured from the Portuguese, and carved doors, a regular feature, their elaborate designs an indication of the house owner's wealth. In this case, he was Sultan Said Bargash, best remembered as the ruler who banned the trade in men, women and children and instigated Zanzibar's most active construction period. He built the aptly named House of Wonders as a ceremonial palace in 1883. More than a century later, restoration work is helping to make Zanzibar a worthwhile lived-in environment. It's been declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. But funding from private and public sources will be vital to implement in full the conservation plan and to make East Africa's largest historic city worthy of future generations.